And welcome to this Wednesday edition of CBS Sports HQ. Amanda Garrett, Chris Hassel with you. There could be arguments for who stirs up the most controversy here on CBS Sports HQ.
Yeah.
A little bit. However, this man takes no prisoners. Get off my lawn, Pete Prisco. And he is officially out. You can see it now on CBSSports.com. His top 100 NFL players of 2020.
If you disagree with him, though, he'll just flat out block you on Twitter.
Just block.
We'll disagree with him here on the program, though, and there's no way he can get away from us unless he doesn't want a paycheck this week. We do have a new number one this year in Pete Prisco's top 100. Last year it was Aaron Donald. Now it's Super Bowl champion Patrick Mahomes.
Chiefs Kingdom is in excellent shape going forward, as long as number 15 stays healthy. Coming off his first Super Bowl win, Patrick Mahomes is just scratching the surface of his potential at age 24. A scary thought for the rest of the league. There is no skill he does not possess. Rocket arm? Check. Pinpoint accuracy? Check. Mobility when plays break down? Check. Poise under pressure? Check. And most importantly, his work ethic and drive matches his physical gifts. Say hello to the new face of the NFL, Patrick Mahomes II.
So Mahomes jumping Aaron Donald, who was number one going into last season. Russell Wilson, Michael Thomas, Christian McCaffrey rounding out the top five. The reigning MVP, Lamar Jackson, at 7. Aaron Rodgers still in the top 10, but barely. And we have the man who put together the top 100 list, Pete Prisco. You can see that whole list right now on CBSSports.com. We also have Danny Cannell. Danny, you can still have the J.C. Chazé mic on? No, he took that off, I guess. He used to have that little mic here. But I guess he went with the audible last second, like a good quarterback does. Pete, let's start at the very top here with the quarterbacks. Nobody's going to have a problem with Patrick Mahomes, number one. But Russell Wilson at number 3 and Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP, all the way down at 7.
Yeah, this took me a little while to get on the Russell Wilson bandwagon, as many Seattle fans remind me constantly on Twitter. But look, he played to an MVP level last year and didn't have a lot of help. I know the receivers, Metcalf came on late in the season, but offensive line, a big problem. When you look at the defense, it's not the same defense they've had in the past. So he was asked to do more, and I think he should be asked to do even more. I think they need to open up that offense, let him play free and loose. He'll put up much better numbers. So I put him at 3. Lamar Jackson at 7 for me. This was one of those situations where I look at the quarterback. He had a wonderful year, but it's only 1 year. Remember, this guy hasn't won a playoff game. He's 2 years removed. He's a year removed from, basically almost getting benched in a playoff game. I do like what I see from him. I think he might be higher on the list next year because I do think he's going to improve as a passer.
Well, fine. First off, I want to say I commend you for putting 2 out of your top 3 spots as quarterbacks. I was livid last year that you wouldn't have a quarterback number 1 overall. Finally, you come to your senses and realize Patrick Mahomes, the most valuable player in the NFL to his team. I'm with you on the other 2. You know, with Russell Wilson, I think finally it's time he's starting to get some of the credit he deserves. Somehow he's kind of flies under the radar and is underappreciated for the consistent success that he's had there in Seattle. You mentioned the MVP-type play. I mean, you could argue he's kept that level almost the last 3 or 4 years that he's been there. He's been consistent. He's started 143 games in a row for the Seattle Seahawks. How about consider this? His passer rating is second all-time in the history of the NFL for his career, only behind Aaron Rodgers. You talk about a consistent performer, and it's kind of ironic that you mention in the same breath as Aaron Rodgers, somebody who's constantly complaining about weapons or lack of weapons. You mentioned it, Pete, but Russell Wilson has not had exactly a bunch of playmakers to work with, and yet he's still put that offense on his back. And then Lamar Jackson being down a little bit, I'm totally on board with you. I love his trajectory, but it's only year 2. I think there are some circles that say, well, let's figure it out. The defenses are going to figure him out. I don't think there's an answer for him, but we do need to see it more consistently over time for him to make a jump higher than 7 coming off his MVP season.
All right, so those are the top quarterbacks right now with Lamar Jackson at 7, Russell Wilson at 3, and Patrick Mahomes up at number 1. Last season, Pete, you had Aaron Donald at number 1. Only drops 1 spot. Now, he's the only defensive player in your top 5, despite a slightly down season.
Yeah, he wasn't as dominant as he was the year before. His sack numbers came down. He's still the best defensive player in the league. I don't think there's any question about that. He just wasn't the same guy as he was the previous year, which is why I dropped him down. Plus, Patrick Mahomes plays the entire season. He's the MVP, and we saw what he did in the postseason, which is why he's number one. So Donald's play was down just a tad, but for him, that's, still makes him better than everybody else in the NFL.
All right, moving on to Michael Thomas, who had that record-breaking season in 2019, 149 catches. He's all the way up to number 4, Pete, your highest-ranked wide receiver.
Yeah, and his season was amazing last year. And what's really amazing about it is he doesn't get help from the other side. I mean, the number of catches, the ability to make plays in clutch situations, plays for first downs. He was one of the leaders in that. He's phenomenal in that offense. And now that he has help in Emmanuel Sanders on the other side, I think he's going to be even better. The numbers might not be as much, but he will be a better receiver this year. Those numbers are amazing. You catch that many passes and set the all-time record without much help on the other side. That tells you how good he is.
Yeah, he's an absolute stud, and there's no question about it. He deserves this ranking at 4th overall. You look at the difference, and there are some great wide receivers on this list, but when you have 331 more receiving yards than your closest competitor, when you have 33 more receptions than the guy right behind you, and you average 12 more yards per game than the closest guy behind you, that's a sign of sheer dominance. And it really was a breakout season of sorts for Michael Thomas, and he's finally starting to get the recognition he deserves. Yes, he plays with a Hall of Fame quarterback, but man, does he deliver. And there's a reason Drew Brees throws to him as much as he does.
All right, so we've got quarterbacks in the top 5, a defensive player in the top 5, a wide receiver in the top 5. Even a running back in the top 5 this year, Pete. You didn't have any running backs in your top 10 last season. We know how you feel about them. You said they grow on trees. You pick them off the tree. You run them into the ground, and you draft another one. But that must tell us how much you like Christian McCaffrey, who breaks into your top 5.
Yeah, this pained me to put him this high. I usually don't put a running back in the top 10. That was a special season a year ago. I mean, when you go 1,000, that's a special season. He's not just a running back, and he'll be the first one to tell you. He told us that at the Super Bowl. I had a debate with him about paying running backs. He said, I'm not a running back, I'm a weapon. And he is a weapon, and they paid him like a weapon. That's the difference between him and some of the other running backs in the league. He is an air back. This is an air game. He fits it perfectly. He is a great player. He proved to people he can run inside the tackles. He's a phenomenal receiver out of the backfield. But watch out this year. Joe Brady takes over that offense. I think he might even be better catching the ball out of the backfield.
Pete, I think you get a bad rap sometimes because your reputation is known to just bash running backs. But I do think, and this shows, you have an appreciation for generational type backs that truly make a difference, that aren't interchangeable. And clearly that's what Christian McCaffrey is. Second in the NFL in receptions. He had more catches last year than DeAndre Hopkins, than Julian Edelman, than Julio Jones, some of the best pass catchers in the game, along to go with his 3rd ranking in the NFL rushing rank. So he's clearly a generational type back, a guy who clearly makes a difference, can do it all. And today's pass-happy NFL, as a running back, you have to be multifaceted. You have to be versatile, able to run routes out of the backfield, create mismatches, so that you're a viable pass-catching option. And Christian McCaffrey clearly is that explosive playmaker, fits all the bill. I have zero problem with him being as high as he is.
So that's your top 5. The league's reigning defensive player of the year, Stephon Gilmore, at 6. But let's jump to a couple pass rushers at the back end of your top 10, Pete. Chandler Jones ahead of Khalil Mack after a disappointing season in Chicago.
Yeah, and Chandler Jones has more sacks the past 2 seasons than anybody other than Aaron Donald. He's been outstanding. He has 60 sacks combined in the last 4 seasons and probably doesn't get the due he deserves. He's a guy who can wreck the game. I thought he was the defensive player of the year last year. He was a force for the Arizona Cardinals on a defense that didn't have a lot of help around him. As far as Khalil Mack, his numbers were down last year, his sack numbers. But when I went back and watched the tape, I saw why. He got a lot more attention. There wasn't a lot of help on the other side. They lost Akeem Hicks. That changed the way the defense played a little bit. And I talked to some personnel people about him. They said, no, he's still a top 10 player. I had him there. I kept him there, and he deserved that.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Chandler Jones as high as he is whatsoever. Khalil Mack kind of gone the way of Von Miller after, really kind of wreaking havoc on the NFL. Defenses have really made their offensive game plans designed for some of these guys coming off the edge. Chandler Jones, you haven't seen a drop-off lately, and I think it's the reason he doesn't get a lot of recognition is because of where he plays in Arizona. You don't get a lot of primetime matchups. Your team hasn't been very good. But if this team can get things figured out, if they can challenge in their division, if Kyler Murray continues to develop and they figure out what to do with Isaiah Simmons, all of a sudden he could become a household name if he continues the production that he's been getting. So I'm fully on board with you on Chandler Jones.
Okay, we're going to continue throughout this hour with Pete Prisco as we continue to break down his top 100 NFL players going into 2020. You can find the whole list and explanations on CBSSports.com.
And welcome back. So this hour we are breaking down what you can now find on CBSSports.com. I've already seen a lot of Twitter action, people taking issues with some of these, some liking the other picks there. Pete Prisco's top 100. We're going to take a look at the quarterbacks. There are some questions specifically from former NFL quarterback Danny Cannell. Like, is that really the right spot for Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers? So let's bring in Pete Prisco and Danny Cannell to talk about all of this. Pete, let's talk about Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers. You have Aaron Rodgers at 10. You have Drew Brees at 11, which I do want to mention is up from 19, back on your last list in 2019. He did miss 5 games last season. But Danny, I'm going to start with you here because you say he doesn't necessarily need to be higher, but you think he does need to be above Aaron Rodgers.
I do. I mean, I think when you look at consistency over time, the improvement that Drew Brees is maintaining, consistently winning and getting farther and having his team in a better position. And I get Aaron Rodgers would hurt, but to me, at some point, we've got to start looking at Aaron Rodgers and wondering, all right, you've delivered statistically every year, but where are the deeper playoff runs? Where are the championships? When are you going to start elevating your team to another level that you just, you don't see some other quarterbacks do? But I want to see him play to the elite level and have it convert for once. If he's truly considered one of those great elite quarterbacks, and statistics do play a part in the story. Drew Brees has consistently delivered more to his team. Granted, he does have better weapons, but he's delivered more for his team in the Saints than Aaron Rodgers has with the Packers.
Need I remind Danny Cannell that Aaron Rodgers went a little past Drew Brees in the postseason last year? He did go to the championship game. Drew Brees did not, again, having a home loss to the Vikings. So, look, you can talk about Aaron Rodgers' failures all you want. Everybody will say, hey, he should have more Super Bowls than he does. Probably should. I would agree with that. But last year, learning a new offense, entirely new system. He had to change the way he played a little bit. Didn't get the help he thought he would get from Valdez-Scantling outside. Adams was hurt. The offensive line got whipped in big games. To just put it on Aaron Rodgers is ridiculous. They didn't help him this year, by the way, in the draft and in the offseason. Aaron Rodgers is still a top 10 player in this league and one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I knew this would irritate a lot of people. You know how I feel about Aaron Rodgers. Putting him at 10 was the right move.
Pete, I want to follow up. Let's talk about Drew Brees just a little bit more. 41 years old, and though he is behind Aaron Rodgers in our top 100, we have seen his numbers progress for you over the course of his career. Back in 2016, starting there at 43rd, jumped all the way up to 13th in 2017, then dropped back to 20th, 2018, 19th, I mentioned last year. But just talk about his progression in it and how well he's still playing at the age of 41, Pete.
His brain is phenomenal. And again, it's one of the best weapons in the NFL. He sees things before the defense sees them, and that's what makes him so great. They've changed the way they play. You remember, they used to throw it all over the place, and he told me that last summer. He said, look, I can throw for 5,000 yards still. We don't need to do that anymore. So they don't. But he's still capable of having big games. He's still capable of having big seasons, which is why he came back, and which is why the Saints are, again, one of the favorites to be a deep playoff team this year.
Pete, there are two groups of people that should take note of this trend with Drew Brees, and you've given him the credit he deserves. One are young quarterbacks that can really look at Drew Brees and say, man, look at what I can do if I pay attention, become a true student of the game. Because with your mind, you can make up for a lot of physical deficiencies. Maybe you are getting older, your arm is not as strong, you're not as mobile. That doesn't mean your play has to drop off. So I think young quarterbacks could look at Drew Brees as an example of what they can become later in their career. The other group that I would look to are front offices. And, we were talking about the debate between Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees just a second ago. I think the Packers front office should look at what they've given Drew Brees to work with a back like Alvin Kamara, with the top-tier receiver like Michael Thomas, and look at what it's done for this late resurgence in Drew Brees' career. So I think young quarterbacks and other front offices should take note of the late, success that Drew Brees has had in his career and start to mimic it and utilize and do the same things with their quarterbacks that the Saints have done with their stud quarterback.
All right, Drew Brees, 41 years old. Let's talk about Tom Brady. Of course, he is 42 right now. He will enter the season at the age of 43. Danny, I've heard you say it over and over, that 40 is the new 30 when it comes to quarterbacks. And Pete Prisco, you do seem to agree Tom Brady still within your top 20 entering the season at the age of 43. Break that down for us.
He didn't play very well last year, but the offense was awful. The line struggled. They had nobody who could stretch the field. Everybody said, well, he hasn't had a guy who could stretch the field much of the time he was in New England in his career, and that's true. But he had Rob Gronkowski, and when you had Rob Gronkowski in the middle of the field, that opened up things for Julian Edelman and Wes Welker and Danny Amendola and those guys that don't run that well. Well, he didn't have that last year, and it showed up in a big way. He played with a force field at 20 yards, had nothing down the field, and it showed up in his numbers. I think now he gets to Tampa in Bruce Arians' offense, being able to have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate and an improved offensive line. I think he's going to throw for more numbers than he did, many more numbers than he did a year ago. I don't think they're going to be crazy, but 4,500 yards, 33 touchdown passes, I think those are the numbers I think you'll see for Tom Brady in Tampa.
I think this is the perfect spot for Brady because it leaves some room where, there's a lot of uncertainty. I think people are plugging him and assuming that he's going to be this kind of MVP candidate type player, even at his age. I'm with you, Pete. There were some disturbing, alarming signs last year. When he did have protection, he did miss some throws that were uncharacteristic. He didn't, rise to the level of the occasion at times last season. We're all assuming him better, and I'm assuming that too, that now that he's given weapons, he's going to all of a sudden return to his MVP type form, the greatest of all time type form. But there's also a chance that maybe Father Time is starting to catch up. And I love that Amanda's taking note of 40 as the new 30. But at some point, age is going to catch up to him. I don't think it happens now, but it could. And that would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' worst nightmare. But there is that chance. But they are putting him in a position to succeed. They've surrounded him with weapons. They've bolstered up the offensive line. I think you're right. Bruce Arians will modify this offense somewhat where he doesn't have to throw for 5,000 yards. He doesn't have to throw for 45 touchdowns. They'll monitor his throws. They'll try to protect him. And they want to make sure ultimately that they just have a seat at the playoffs. And I don't think that's going to require Tom Brady putting up astronomical stats. It's going to require him doing what he does best, and that's being a winner, lifting up the guys around him.
By the way, you mentioned 40 is the new 30 for quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers told me last summer he's going to play until he's 40, 41, 42, 43. They take care of themselves. They're much better in terms of what they do in the offseason, which is why you can do that. Plus, they don't get hit. Quarterbacks don't get hit anymore. They're the most protected. And in life, 60 is the new 30. I'm on board with that one.
It is good to know, man. Danny, that just makes us babies over here. Let's move on to Kirk Cousins there. I like your thinking, Pete. I got to give it to you. We all love it. Kirk Cousins, another good season for the Vikings, made it to the NFC divisional round of the playoffs. And for you, Pete Prisco, that was good enough to crack your top 100. Kirk Cousins coming in at number 86.
And everybody out there knows I'm a Kirk Cousins critic. I just think at times in big games he wilts, which is well documented in primetime games. He did win a playoff game last year, and I thought his play as a whole was much better last season, which is why I put him on the list. I had a hard time with some of the quarterbacks down on the list. Carson Wentz. Where do I put Ben Roethlisberger? How do you rate him? I didn't put him in the top 100. I could easily make a case for him being there if he's healthy. Carson Wentz, same thing. So I had a tough time with the bottom part of the quarterback grouping, so I put Kirk Cousins in there. I think he earned that right last year.
Kirk Cousins has the same problem that Dak Prescott has. Because they weren't top 5 picks, first rounders, they have to almost earn double the respect. They have to do it for longer. They have to prove to people that they're worthy of being top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. So I'm glad you gave him the credit that he deserves. I think every year I take Kirk Cousins as a flyer for an MVP candidate because he's got the capabilities to put it together. And for the first 8 games last year, he was in that conversation. Now, it didn't work out at the end of the season. His stats kind of came down to earth a little bit. But I do think he's going to give you top 10 statistics. Last year, we finally start them get the wins. He had the massive throw in New Orleans to Adam Thielen, followed by the game-winning touchdown pass to Kyle Rudolph. So he's proved to some of his critics he can get it done big on the biggest stage. He just has to continue to do that and really have a signature season with a deeper playoff run for the Minnesota Vikings. But I do think, Pete, as far as it goes to your top 100, I do think it was very astute that you had Dalvin Cook actually ranked higher in the top 100 because his value is immense to that Vikings offense, probably just as important as Kirk Cousins' success.
All right, let's talk about Carson Wentz here. Topped 4,000 passing yards for the first time in 2019, and he is nowhere to be found on Pete's top 100. Let's take a look at some of the quarterbacks that are, according to Pete Prisco, ranked above him there. You see the list, which does include the likes of Dak Prescott and Matt Ryan and, of course, Kirk Cousins. Danny, I want to start with you. Was this the right decision by Pete Prisco to eliminate Carson Wentz from his top 100?
Yes. Now, this goes back to my overall theory. I think every starting quarterback in the NFL should be a part somewhere in the top 100. I don't think Carson Wentz should bump out any of those guys that are in there, but I think Pete could have found a spot for him, especially when you look at what he did this past season. Now, health is a very real issue. Durability. Didn't finish the season getting knocked out of that playoff game. But what he did late in that season with literally no weapons around him, throwing to a former quarterback in college and Greg Ward Jr. as his biggest playmaker down the stretch, was pretty remarkable. There is no doubt in my mind, if Carson Wentz stays healthy this season, he'll be in Pete's top 100 next year, and he'll have the Philadelphia Eagles in a playoff contention. But he's got to stay healthy and prove his critics, like myself, that wonder if he can do that he actually can complete a whole season and make a deep playoff run.
And I agree with you 100%, Danny. I have no question in my mind that he can be a top 100 quarterback, top 100 player, and a top 5, 6, 7, 8 quarterback. He just has to do it consistently. And last year there were a lot of reasons. The speed was gone. They had so many injuries outside in the passing game. And like you mentioned, he was throwing the guys off the street, converted quarterbacks, and Greg Ward and a bunch of other guys. And he did play well. But again, you have to be on the field for 16 games every year and finish seasons, and he didn't finish last season. I love Carson Wentz. I think the Eagles are going to win the division, and I think Carson Wentz is going to play well. And after a year, I'll look back at this and say, I should have had him in the top 100.
All right, we'll wait for a year from now. Pete Prisco, who is somewhere in his 30s now, Danny Cannell somewhere in his 20s. Congratulations on the age change, guys. Stick around. We are not done with Pete's top 100.
Derrick Henry not even among the top 5 running backs in Pete Prisco's ranking of the top 100 players heading into the 2020 season. Henry coming off a massive 2019 season, helping carry the Titans to the AFC Championship game. No running back had more attempts, more rush yards, more rushing touchdowns than Henry, who was among the best fantasy performers as well last season. So we've got Pete Prisco. We also have Jamie Eisenberg. I'm on a text chain with these two. It's always entertaining. I hope this piece of television streaming will be every bit as entertaining. Jamie wanted to start off with Pete's tweet from, I believe, last night. And Pete, doing what he does, riling everybody up, he tweeted, my top 100 list of NFL players is coming out tomorrow, and guys in my own office are picking it apart. Like I tell them, and we'll remind you tomorrow, you are entitled to your wrong opinion. So, Pete, I guess there are a lot of wrong opinions out there. Am I right?
Well, Jamie is loaded with them, like he is every week when he picks the start of the week. That's just a little shot. I'm kidding. Jamie's actually outstanding at his start of the week, but he wants to pick me apart for running backs. And I don't get it because you know I'm anti-running back. I don't believe in them. And you, what's my phrase, Chris? Go ahead. Say it over and over again. I love hearing it from you.
They grow
and
on
I can't
trees.
understand why Jamie's picking me apart about the running back
And
position.
you run them into the ground,
right.
and then you draft another
them,
one.
you run them into the ground, and then you draft another one. You got it. You got it. Go ahead, Jamie. Rip me apart.
Chris, you should be enjoying this entertainment because Aaron Rodgers in the top 10. I mean, I'm so glad you have me on to talk running backs and wide receivers because I'd hate to make Pete Prisco cry about that selection. I don't understand Rodgers at number 10. But the nice thing is that the nice thing is that we have a shortage of toilet paper in this country. So if you can still print, go to your printer, print out this list, and you're covered just in case you run short.
Oh, ooh. Jamie with the low blow. How about Derrick Henry in particular?
That could be rough on you, Jamie.
Jamie, how about Derrick Henry in particular at 69? Now, I thought that was a little low considering what he did last season, but you're looking the other way because Pete ranked him ahead of guys like Nick Chubb and Joe Mixon.
I was surprised. You know, I think, you know, with Derrick Henry, this is not a Pete Prisco type running back. And while Henry was obviously awesome last year and leading the NFL in rushing, he doesn't do a lot in the passing game. As we know, 18 catches last year. A career best. He has more games played than catches. And so I'm looking at guys that he has behind him, Nick Chubb and Joe Mixon in particular. I know Pete loves Joe Mixon. I'm with him on that one. And I think Chubb, as we saw last year, was neck and neck with Derrick Henry in terms of trying to be the leading rusher. And I think he projects to be a better player this year as well. So while Henry was awesome in 2019, if you're looking forward, I think that you're looking at two better players behind Henry on Pete's list. And look, to be fair, Pete's list is great. You know, just a few little minor glaring things that stand out. But this was one to me in the running back position, that Henry over Chubb and Mixon.
Yeah, and you know how I feel about Joe Mixon. I think the last 8 games of the season, Joe Mixon was as good as any running back in the league. He was phenomenal. He rushed for over 120 yards, I think, 3 times in the last 8 games. He had 4 100-yard games. And in talking to Zach Taylor, one of the things they realized they had a tough time getting him acclimated to what they wanted to do. But once they did, they gave him the football, and he went wild. He will be much higher on this list next year. That much I guarantee. As far as Derrick Henry, look, he led the league in rushing, and then he went in and carried a team to a championship game in the playoffs. It's hard not to put him where I put him. But I tend to agree with Jamie a little bit. I think over 300 carries is a lot of carries and wear and tear on a body. That might start to show up next year for Derrick Henry.
Jamie, let's see your top 12 running backs for non-PPR and how you rank them compared to Pete Prisco. Take us through these.
Well, I think, you know, you look at the guys at the top 5, I guess, you know, when you look at Dalvin Cook at the 5th spot, those 5 guys are, you know, have the chance to be amazing and can really challenge McCaffrey from Barkley through Cook and challenge McCaffrey to be the #1 guy. In non-PPR, I love Nick Chubb. I think Kevin Stefanski's system is going to be perfect for him as it was for Dalvin Cook last year. I'm with Pete. I think this is going to be a big year for Joe Mixon as well. It's really hard to get Chubb and Mixon any higher. Henry's kind of by default. You know, he's a guy that I'm going to avoid. Like I said, you know, I don't think he's going to have the same type of production this year that he had last year. Like Pete said, it's not just the 300 carries that he had. It's the 400 total touches when you factor in the playoffs. That is hard to come back from year after year, and especially for a bigger running back. I love the upside of Kenyon Drake and Miles Sanders, and I think Jacobs has a chance to be special in his second season. Eckler, this is a guy I'm surprised Pete left off his list, because that's the type of running back that Pete typically loves, a guy that is an airbag, catches the ball out of the backfield, doesn't have to do all the work between the tackles. And I think with Melvin Gordon now gone, we're going to see the best of Austin Eckler.
So, Pete, how close was Eckler to your top 100?
I'll be honest with you, a lot of those guys on the just miss list, they were in at one point. I went back and did more work and took them out, and he was one of those guys. I love Eckler. I think he is the prototypical back for the way the game is played. I do think Josh Kelly, a rookie from UCLA, will impact him a little bit this year in terms of carrying the football. The guy on Jamie's list that I had a hard time with, and I know fantasy guys love him, and Jamie loves him, but Kamara rushed for 797 yards last year. I'm a big critic of the way they use him. I think he needs to carry the ball more. He doesn't get enough carries. He's great catching the ball out of the backfield, and he's a really good player, but I had a tough time with him because he doesn't rush for enough yards because they don't give him enough carries.
Let's move on to wide receivers now as Pete Prisco and Jamie Eisenberg kind of break down Pete's top 100 players in the NFL, which you can read on CBSSports.com. The top one, obviously, Michael Thomas at number 4, the only wide receiver in the top 10. Then it's Julio Jones, Chris Godwin into the top 30, followed by DeAndre Hopkins, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans. Jamie, what's your biggest beef with this list as you look at the top 9?
It's Devontae Adams down at number 7. I think he could be the second best receiver in football. not just in fantasy, but also in reality. You know, you're looking at a guy that's going to have to carry this receiving core. And if Pete is looking ahead with Aaron Rodgers still at number 10, he's got to have Devontae Adams higher, because Adams is going to be the only guy in this passing attack. You look what they did this offseason, obviously not adding any of the premier playmakers. Don't tell me Devin Funchess, because he's just not that good. And so Adams, what we saw from him last year coming back from the toe injury after he missed 4 games, he was electric once again. He's a guy that's consistently double digits in touchdowns. He's going to be over 100 catches this year. I think he's going to be over 1,500 yards. I think he's going to be the second best receiver in football. And to be honest with you, Chris, in non-PPR leagues, I'm toying with the idea of putting Adams ahead of Thomas in my rankings. I think he's going to have that type of season. So he's been good, so the resume is already there. And if you're looking ahead to 2020, I don't know which way Pete is looking at this from Adams' standpoint, he's going to be better than Julio and a lot of the guys that Pete has in those 6 spots ahead of him.
Look, I know you're the president of the Devontae Adams fan club. I know that. You've been that for, what, 2 or 3 years now? You've been pushing Devontae Adams. I love him. I love him as a player, but I can't put him ahead of Chris Godwin. I just can't. Chris Godwin was phenomenal last year, and now he has Tom Brady. You know, whether they're going to throw the ball as much because the defense might be better, who knows? But Chris Godwin had a better year. He's a better player. The one, you know, there are a couple guys that I, flirted with, and it was tough and putting those receivers, because there's so many of them, Jamie. There's probably 15 receivers, 16, 17 receivers, and the bottom 6, 7 guys are interchangeable. So I had a tough time putting him in a spot, but I'm a big Devontae Adams fan.
Coming up next week, Pete Prisco's top 500 NFL players and beyond. We continue with wide receivers, and there's some big names there at the bottom of that wide receiver list. A.J. Green, 8. Odell Beckham Jr., 9. But, Jamie, you think someone else should be above those 2 guys. Who would that be?
It's Juju, and again, this is looking ahead as opposed to looking back. And if you're looking back with A.J. Green, you better get way back, because he hasn't played very much lately, didn't play last year. We don't know how he's going to do with Zach Taylor. We don't know how he's going to do with Joe Burrow. So 2 new things for A.J. Green, and is he healthy? Odell Beckham, as we saw last year, another injury-plagued season. Didn't play well in the Browns' offense. Didn't play well with Baker Mayfield. Is he still the same guy? Juju gets Ben Roethlisberger back. What we saw from him in his first 2 seasons, he's only 23 years old. I think he's going to have a much better year than Beckham, certainly a much better year than A.J. Green. And if I think you're going back and looking at what Juju's done when he had a healthy quarterback compared to what he's going to do now, throw out the 2019 campaign, because it was a disaster for Pittsburgh's offense all the way around. This is going to be a huge year for Juju. So resume's already established, and looking ahead, Juju's better. I don't understand why A.J. Green and Odell Beckham are ahead of him.
Well, it's hard to grade A.J. Green because he didn't play last year, and he didn't play probably by his own decision. Late in the season, he didn't want to play. I think he's rejuvenated by having the young quarterback there. I think Joe Burrow's going to be very good. I think the offense is going to be very good. So I think his numbers are going to go way up this year. A.J. Green is not a guy who's washed up. He can still make plays. You talked about injuries. Juju Smith-Schuster missed games with injuries last year. And granted, he played with bad quarterbacks last year. When he was healthy, bad quarterbacks. Beckham had a better year than people give him credit for. It wasn't, a monster 95 catch, 10 touchdown year. But he wasn't a disaster either, even though that passing game wasn't as good as we expected. That's why I put Green and Beckham ahead of Juju.
Okay, save the best for last, or I think Jamie would say the worst for last. DJ Shark in Pete's top 100. Jamie, you've got 30 seconds.
This is the worst selection of Pete's list. It's definitely the worst selection of running backs and wide receivers. He needs to go back to the drawing board with DJ Chark. You look at these other wide receivers that should be on this list. Kenny Golladay, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley. We can go on and on and on. I like DJ Chark a lot. I think he's going to step forward in his 3rd season, but he doesn't belong on a top 100 list. You can make a case for defensive players like Micah Fitzpatrick should be over DJ Chark. These receivers, all these guys, better than DJ Chark, will be better than DJ Chark. Fantasy, reality, however you want to slice it, this is the worst selection Pete Prisco may have ever made in making his top 100. It's terrible, Pete.
He'll be higher on the list next year. He caught 73 passes catching from a rookie quarterback and stiff Nick Foles. Enough said.
Okay. Pete's not backing down. Maybe even top 10 next year. DJ Shark, top 100 for Pete Prisco. Okay, guys. Jamie, thank you so much. Pete, hang tight. We're going to be back with you in just a minute before the top of the hour. Much more with Pete.
And welcome back to CBS Sports HQ. We are going to break down Pete Prisco's top defensive players in his top 100. My favorite from him was his tweet. According to his list, he said, "Here you go. Eat it alive. Guaranteed to make you mad. Good." And we'll see if Bryant McFadden is happy or mad with Professor Pete. Let's bring back in Pete Prisco and two-time Super Bowl champ Bryant McFadden. Okay, I want to start with Grady Jarrett at number 22. And B-Mac, I'm going to go to you first. So he's at 22 ahead of Chris Jones, now franchise tag Chris Jones, who's at 36. And you think that Chris Jones had a better year than Garrett, right?
No question. Listen, I love Grady Jarrett as a football player. He's one of the best defensive players. He's one of the best players on the Atlanta Falcons team. But if you're comparing Grady Jarrett and Chris Jones, especially when both players are healthy, playing their best, I'm taking Chris Jones. Chris Jones dealt with some injuries, especially towards the latter part of 2019, but he still was very, very effective. I mean, looking at his numbers, played in 13 ball games, he had more sacks than Grady Jarrett. He had more pressures than Grady Jarrett, and they're around the same numbers in total tackles. So for me, seeing Grady Jarrett be listed as the second best defensive tackle on Pete's top 100 list behind Aaron Donald, that is the first issue that I have with this list. And oh, by the way, I have quite a few issues with Pete's list.
Look, Chris Jones is a great player. Grady Jarrett's a phenomenal player. And by the way, if you look at the numbers and go back and watch the games, Grady Jarrett had a better season than Chris Jones. And I think there's a reason that people kind of shunned Grady Jarrett. He came into the league as a late-round pick. One of my all-time favorites, was my captain of my Better Than team when he came out. I loved him then, and he's become a force on the interior. It's close, but I think Grady Jarrett had a better season than Chris Jones. And look, the Chiefs haven't exactly rolled out the red carpet in terms of a giant contract for Chris Jones. Grady Jarrett got paid.
All right, let's move on to Richard Sherman. Pete, you have him at 57, despite what a lot of people thought. Doesn't appear to be slowing down a whole lot. And you say he's a big reason the 49ers made it to the Super Bowl. So give us your reasoning behind Richard Sherman here.
Yeah, Richard Sherman played great football last year, and a lot of people thought, well, is he starting to slow down? Is he not the same player? And he bounced back and had a terrific season for the 49ers. And the one thing that he had to play past was the fact that the other side struggled. The other side had all kinds of issues. They played a bunch of guys over there. They benched some guys and then ended up playing Mosley for much of the time and late in the playoffs. But I think this is one of those situations where Richard Sherman was a big part of what the 49ers did and really responded and came back to look like the Richard Sherman of old last year.
Well, the only issue that I have with Richard Sherman is going into this year. I agree with you, Pete. Richard Sherman played real good football. I mean, many people felt like he was towards the end of his career than, of course, his prime years, and he proved a lot of doubters wrong. But towards the end of the season, especially in the postseason, we didn't see the best that Richard Sherman had to offer. And I think looking at where he's located on your list and some other defensive backs, some other corners, me personally, I believe Marlon Humphrey should be higher. Granted, they're only 2 spots away from each other, but Marlon Humphrey should be higher. And then you have Patrick Peterson, a guy that's in the mid-70s. For me, Pat should be higher as well. Remember, he missed the first 4 ball games because of a suspension. It took some time for him to get his legs underneath him. And then when he finally got into rhythm, he started to play pretty good football. So looking at the cornerback list, yes, Pete, I think you got it right, but I would not have Richard Sherman ahead of Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're close. Don't get me wrong, they're very close. But, you know, as far as Patrick Peterson, and you know this well, he was suspended, came back, and for the first 4 or 5 games, he didn't play like Patrick Peterson. After that, he did. So what are you getting? And one more thing, B-Mac, aren't you related to Patrick Peterson in some form or fashion?
That has nothing to do with my argument for Patrick Peterson, Pete. That has nothing to do with it.
All right, so B-Mac already taking issue with your list. Pete just cracks himself up. Let's talk about Darius Leonard because this is at the bottom. Barely in this top 100, Pete. 99. Last year you had him in 88. Now, Darius Leonard actually came on our network and said he thought he deserved to be Defensive Player of the Year. B-Mac, you do think he needs to be higher than 99. Why is that?
No question, Amanda. Basically, Pete said Darius Leonard barely cracked the top 100. Darius is listed at number 99. No way, Jose. Darius Leonard has done nothing but dominate since he entered into the National Football League. And now Pete continues to overlook his skill set, his talent. Look at what he did last year. Only played 13 ball games, 121 tackles. He led the Indianapolis Colts in interceptions. By the way, he plays the linebacker position. He was second on the team in PBUs. He was second on the team in sacks. He's an all-around defensive player. This is like a snub in my opinion. Yes, he made the top 100, but he shouldn't be at number 99. Some people feel like Darius Leonard have an opportunity to have a legit case to potentially be Defensive Player of the Year. So you're telling me a potential Defensive Player of the Year candidate is number 99? That is totally wrong, Pete. You need to redo this list, especially if you're listing Darius Leonard at number 99.
B-Mac, he didn't play as well as he did the year before. That's the bottom line. I love his game, and I think there's a ton of ability there, and he can do it all. He can rush the passer. He's good against the pass. He can blitz when he has to. But I think this is one of those situations where his play tailed off last year. Now, whether the injuries had some factor in it, who knows? But he did not play as well, which is why he's down the list.
Pete, so you're punishing Darius Leonard because his rookie year he was unbelievable. Okay, his second year, he dealt with some injuries, didn't give you the same production, but he still was second team All-Pro. So you're telling me if you had a decline in production, but yet and still you still make an All-Pro team, that should not warrant you being listed at number 99. If that's the only argument you can give me for Darius Leonard being listed at the bottom of your list, that's total BS.
Pete, you here to fire back?
Well, I mean, where would he rank him? I'm just curious to see. Everybody thinks it's so easy to pick apart a list. Where would you rank him, B-Mac?
I would have Darius Leonard anywhere between the 40s or the 50s. No lower than the 50s. It could be no question. Darius Leonard is one of the best linebackers in the National Football League. He's one of the best interior linebackers in the National Football League. What he's done in 2 years, remember, he got snubbed his rookie campaign. But then he started to get the recognition. Dealt with some injuries. Only played in 13 ball games, Pete. He had over 120 tackles. He led the team in interceptions. He was second in the sacks. Guess what? I saw a number. When you look at his return yards from interceptions, he averaged 18 yards a return on interceptions, not to mention the yak that he provided for his offense. Me personally, yes. Anywhere between the 30s or the 50s, Darius Leonard should definitely be higher. But clearly, number 99, this is wrong.
All right, we're going to move on from Darius Leonard because we got to get to Minkah Fitzpatrick there because, Pete, he misses, flat out misses your top 100. I know the guys, Will Brinson of the Pick Six Pod, called this your biggest snub. B-Mac, this is your team. Feel free to weigh in.
This has nothing, Amanda, this has nothing to do with my love for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This only has to do with being right. And when you're right, you're right. And when you're wrong, you're wrong. Pete, you're wrong. You're dead wrong. I was fired up about Darius Leonard being number 99. Ooh, I was super hot. I was sweating on my forehead and everything. But when I saw Fitzpatrick not making your list at all, how is that possible? Fitzpatrick in 2019, at one point in time, he was involved in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. 5 interceptions, sacks, touchdowns, tackles. He instantly improved a real good defense. He made the Pittsburgh Steelers great a year ago. His big playability coming through in the clutch with game-changing like plays was something that he did throughout the entire season. Don't forget, he got traded during the season, so it took him some time for him to get familiar with the defensive philosophy there. But when he did, unbelievable. So you're telling me he didn't make the top 100? How is that possible?
Because he didn't. There were a lot of good safeties and guys who played better than him. Guys like Justin Simmons, the Denver Broncos, played better than he did. And quite frankly, there were a couple other guys that played better. He might be on the list next year, B-Mac. I might give you that. I love Minkah Fitzpatrick. I've always been a big fan, but he didn't earn the right to be on the list in my estimation. Pittsburgh Steeler homer.
So Jimmy Ward played better football than Minkah Fitzpatrick last year?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
What? Oh my goodness.
All right, I'm gonna let you guys carry this off on Twitter so everybody watching can just go see what you guys argue about on there. Pete, B-Mac, thank you so much for weighing in here. Good luck on the Twitterverse.
You don't need it. There's a new Pick Six podcast out. Pete Prisco is a part of that with Will Brinson as a guest.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Check it out.
Or just a lot of yelling.
That's Amanda Guerra. I'm Chris Hassel. Much more on Pete Prisco's Top 100 coming up throughout the afternoon.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.